Welcome to 7 Investing Now, a show that teaches you how to take a long-term view on investing by better understanding what's happening in the market now.
Good afternoon, 7 investors, and welcome to the Monday edition of 7 Investing Now. My name, of course, is Daniel Brooks Klein. As you can tell, I am not in the home studio, Max Chatsko. I'm in Paris. I am at Paris in Las Vegas. Max, have you seen the Hangover movies?
Yeah. Did you wake up on a mattress on the roof this morning?
Well, here's the thing. So I'm here with our former colleague and my good friend, Matt Frankel. Haven't seen him, and there's a tiger in the bathroom. So no, just kidding. We maybe had an ill-advised pastry a little late last night. It was not a debauched night at all. But Max, we're not going to talk a ton about Vegas. I will say Vegas is doing better than Miami. There is a very serious mask requirement here. There is very serious social distancing. There's plexiglass between every station at the tables. It makes it less social. There's some things closed that don't make a ton of sense. Like I'm in a hotel room because the business center's closed. I'm not entirely sure why me being in an office in the business center helps with COVID, but I think they're taking opportunities to cut expenses where possible. Have you been to Vegas, Max?
Yeah, once.
So yeah, it is every bit of excess. We couldn't get a reservation, so we didn't go last night, but we were going to go to a bar. I guess it's just a bar. It's on top of a candy store. And they have drinks that are basically like, a Milky Way in a glass. And it looked really fabulous, but you had to have a reservation. So we'll be going there Tuesday night. But we're not going to talk about Vegas. We may complain a little bit about my hotel room. I'll talk about that later. I'm in a suite where the second half of the suite, which would normally be a living room, is just an empty room. Like, I don't know what makes that a suite. Like, what would I do in there? Just like
that's for the tiger, Dan. That's where the tiger goes.
It could be. But we're going to talk about investing lessons you've learned from the pandemic. We're going to start with some of our own lessons, and then we're going to move on to some lessons you shared with us. I threw this out on Twitter yesterday, and I think within 10 minutes it had about 30 responses. It's up to an insane amount of responses. So there were a lot of good responses that I didn't share. There's also some people who do this for a living, and I wasn't so sure they'd want me to share, so I skipped some of those, but there is a ton of great viewer response. But Max, what have you learned about investing due to the pandemic?
Yeah, so I think this was a big shock for many people, right? It was kind of abrupt. It was this like once in a century event. You think it can't happen?
Oh no, I saw it coming. I had year-long pandemic, and nobody saw this.
So, but it made me think hard and long about, maybe if you're optimizing work for making money, you're going to be sacrificing, giving up some other things. So, just for me and my old job, it just wasn't a great fit for me. I was always like stressed out. It started to conflict with some of my values a little bit. And again, I was just kind of optimizing for money. There were a lot of things that just weren't working for me personally, right? We know a lot of people that do that, and we're friends with many of them. So it's not anything against that, but just for me, it wasn't a great fit. So if you are fortunate enough to have opportunities, I'm young, I have relatively limited responsibilities. So I could take a little bit more risk, join a startup, maybe try something else. So if you're in that position, I would encourage you to, don't work some job that you're just not really fulfilled in, or maybe it's a dead end job for you, or for whatever reason, maybe look around.
So money is important, but it isn't everything. And you really need to sit down. And this is important with investing, because one of the things about investing is if you can put more money in earlier, you're obviously in a better position. So one of the things I often tell people to do is look at their expenses and say, okay, this money I'm spending, is it bringing me joy? And I hate to go all, I forget that lady's name on the Netflix lady that tells you to throw away your stuff if it doesn't bring you joy. But that being said, you really need to look, and we did a bit of an audit of some of the expenses we had during the pandemic. And, I would have gotten rid of Netflix. I wouldn't, because T-Mobile pays for it, but I don't use it. That being said, I live in a house with 2 other people who like true crime. They do use it. But for me, I was happier at the place we both used to work than you were. But the pandemic destroyed my ability to have work-life balance. When you do a job that the more work you do, the more you get paid, having things like travel and being able to take a cruise weekend or whatever it is for me, that was creating my workspace, my life work balance. That being able to go to Disney World regularly would just sort of force me to not work. And I always felt guilty about the money I was making, but if I was doing something fun, it didn't matter. In a world where there was nothing fun, which I think that was pretty much true. Like, what did we get? Wonder Woman 84. That was like the first 6 months of the pandemic. Like, we got like, and it was terrible, but we got like one thing we kind of look forward to. I really stepped back and went, okay, what's my number? And like, what do I need to make? And how can I just sort of say, okay. And with what we do at 7 Investing, we're all involved. Last night was Sunday night. It was 3 hours early for me here in Vegas. And I was like, why are we slacking about marketing efforts this late at night? And for the rest of you, well, for the people in Texas, it was 2 hours early. But for the people on the East Coast, it was late at night. So we are passionate. That being said, nobody says, hey, don't go to Vegas. They just say, oh, could you still kind of host a show like while you're there? And that to me is important. The fact that, I'll give our boss, Simon Erickson, a lot of credit. The fact that he's very protective of our weekends. And we do a couple of marathon days a month to accommodate the schedule of some of our people. But that being said, if we do that marathon day, that makes up for the Thursday we have family obligations or something we have to do, or like, and I think money is not everything. It can make you very lonely. But Jordy Cries says discipline is essential. Max, your thoughts about that? I'm not a particularly disciplined financial person.
Yeah, I mean, I learned the lessons of discipline, in my 20s, right? I mean, early in your 20s, it's easy to just kind of be a knucklehead and you're doing all kinds of things. And, but I think in health too, like in diet and exercising, waking up at the right times or getting enough sleep. Yeah, discipline is very important. And obviously for finances, making a budget and sticking to a budget like you did, audit your expenses. There's a lot of things you're probably spending money on that you maybe don't need. And, if you do that audit, you can actually identify that and maybe cut some of that out. So, discipline is important for living below your means, Dan.
And I took this one because my thing I learned from the pandemic was just how much money I waste. Because in the first 6 months of the pandemic, when I was making more money than I generally make, I was literally like getting Amazon packages, and I'm like, I don't remember ordering anything from Amazon. It was really when the 2 pounds of toffee showed up, and I had to explain to my wife why I ordered 2 pounds of toffee, and I did not want to explain that it was an impulse buy at 2 a.m. Because at that particular moment, you know what I really wanted? Toffee. And of course, I ordered it from Amazon as if 2 days later, I was still going to be that excited by toffee. And you know what? I was but that being said, I've really tried to take more of a disciplined approach to, do I want this? Do I need this? Do I need the 700th gimmicky battery charger that might be slightly easier to carry around the theme park, but then never turns out to be? Or maybe can I get by with the 35 of them I already own anyway? But yes, Jordy, discipline is essential. Miguel Angel Jimenez Montes says, I should have started to invest years ago. Almost anyone except the kids of people we know who's started investing for them at birth. That's true of almost everybody. Max, do you wish you'd started earlier?
I started in about 2008, 2009. So I was 18 or 19 years old. I was in college, but I didn't always keep up with it during my 20s. Like we just talked about, discipline's important. But yeah, I think, the important thing is you're never really too late. I mean, just start now and, if you have a long-term mindset, that's all you need.
So we're talking your comments on lessons you learned for investing during the pandemic. We're also happy to take some live comments. Roman Michael says, sounds like a great place to work. Yeah, it is a great place to work. We all like each other. And again, the places we previously worked, I love a lot of people there. I loved the work I was doing. So a comment about one place is not necessarily a negative comment, or you can love something and then outgrow it or be in a different position. But that being said, yeah, we have a lot of fun. We also feel like we're doing good things, like helping people and empowering people to invest in their future. It means that in theory, in like 30 years, some of these people who comment on our show are going to send us like thank you notes, like, from, the Caribbean or whatever. Like I was able to retire because of 7 Investing. But we would love more of your live comments. Wherever you're watching this, in theory, there is a comment field. And if you comment there, you should be able to see it. Kevin Eckmark says, always have multiple flows of income. I'm not so sure about that one. I've generally had a job as my major flow of income. And I don't consider anything that I earn in, say, like a dividend income at that point. That's just reinvestable. I do understand having optionality, and I feel like my skills give me some optionality if for some reason I needed to make more income. Max, your thoughts there?
Yeah, I see the sentiment a lot among younger people, people my age, have multiple income streams. Great in theory. And if you can do it, great. Maybe you can have a website or some little newsletter or something that people pay you $5 a month, like on Substack or something, and make some money there just to supplement your income. And again, like if you lost your job during COVID, though, there's maybe those other income streams might have not helped so much. But yeah, it's important maybe to diversify and always, I think it's more important to have a emergency fund, which might get us into our next comment here.
Yeah, feel free to read the next comment if you like, because I'm not entirely sure where you're going.
Okay. Leo Diaz says cash is a position too, and should be in your top 10 positions. I don't know exactly where you want to rank it, but I think absolutely you need to have an emergency fund. And Dan, I don't know about you, but I mean, before the pandemic anyway, there's different advice and it depends on everybody, but should you have 3 months of living expenses in your emergency fund or 6 months? The pandemic maybe might have pushed that into the longer and maybe even 12 months, depending on what your job is, which again is hard to build up to. But
I think it depends on your career. So I think 6 months is what you should build for, and that's a very strong number. But if you have 6 months, you need to look at like, okay, I am a high demand programmer, and if I lost my job at whatever company I work for, the odds that I'd get another job relatively quickly, or certainly within 3 or 4 months, are very, very high. If you're in a high pay field where it takes a lot of time to get a job, you might not want to do that. You might want to be in a position where you have a year. Like, my brother is a, very high powered guy. He's a chief commercial officer for Tottenham, which is a Premier League team. And 1 or 2 times when he was out of work, it took 3 or 4 months because the process for big jobs takes time. Especially as you make more money. Look, if you're making, and I made, I don't know, 25 grand in my first job. If you're working at Target and you're making 22 grand a year, your ability to land another job that gets that income back is probably higher than if you're someone that makes $300,000 a year. So I think cash as a position is really talking about cash you keep on hand for investing opportunities. Cash as an emergency fund, I agree. It probably should be 6 months or longer. And we've all learned during the pandemic that whatever we thought might not be true. Arhoon Mohan says, no one knows what the markets will do. Max, we've seen that unbelievably more than we thought we would.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to that previous question. So I didn't recognize that was probably meant cash in your portfolio. We've talked about that before too, though. Like, I mean, do you keep a lot of cash in your portfolio? You kind of know what you're going to buy every month, right? Or...
Yeah, no, I don't. So I transfer money into my portfolio account every other week, and I spend it almost always immediately, unless there's a restriction. Like we've had our call, and I want to buy Max's pick, but we don't buy our own picks until we've made them public. So until you have an opportunity to buy, we don't buy. That just seems fair, even though obviously we're not a market moving company yet. So I think that's, I'm also in position, and Max, you probably are too, where if I see something I really want to buy, I can loan myself the money. I could transfer the money early. I could put a little extra in. I'm lucky that my wife and I both work. We don't, well, our expenses are high now because I'm trying to sell my house and I have a condo that's sitting empty that no one will buy. Again, it's beautiful in West Palm Beach. If you'd like to move to West Palm Beach, message me. Put a question in the comments here.
Yeah. So in theory, I mean, having cash on hand sounds great, right? Every time there's a dip, I think you wish you had more cash to maybe take advantage of opportunities. But also, if you're sitting on too much cash, I mean, sometimes it doesn't always pan out, right? I mean, it's just a tough thing to really like optimize, I think, in principle.
Yeah, there can be opportunity lost. I'm a paranoid guy, so my sort of backup fund is always higher than I generally would expect it to be. Our friend and former colleague, Jeremy Bowman, and we're going to take a few more of these, and then we're going to talk about mRNA. That's something that, 6 months ago, I would have called Mr. NA and not known what it was. But now, of course, because of the vaccines, everybody knows about the mRNA platform. And we're going to talk about that and how it's not necessarily a cure-all. After that, we're going to talk biotech IPOs. So again, we would love your questions and comments. You've got a question about Vegas, happy to answer that as well. But our former colleague and friend, Jeremy Bowman, says, the world is more adaptable than I thought. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Who would think that we could go 12 months and the unemployment rate would come back pretty quickly to not historic lows, but it's not particularly high anymore. Again, if you lost your job, I understand it's not in a great place.
Yeah, and a year ago, wasn't it crazy? Wasn't it like, oh my, we're in a pandemic, like that's wild, And then like a couple months in, it was still a terrible thing, but like for the most part, everybody kind of got into this like sense of normalcy about it. And like now we're still in a pandemic, like daily cases are still pretty high, and we're like, it's like, okay, this is I hate to use the term the new normal, right? Everybody kind of went a little wild with that, but like we really are like kind of adapting to it.
We figured out that life can go on. That look, we worked at a place that had used Zoom a lot. Like I had a lot of Zoom meetings as part of my, you not so much, but I had a lot of Zoom meetings as part of my regular day. So it wasn't that weird. I always worked remotely, and it wasn't that fun that I couldn't go visit the office and go see people. It's not that fun now that we're not all vaccinated, so it wouldn't be easy for the 7 Investing team to get together. But that being said, the tools were all there. They were just ready. And I guess I feel like I sort of knew that because I've worked for many years remotely, going back to my days at Microsoft, where I was the only person on the East Coast on a team that was in the West Coast and in India, where I saw my colleagues, once every 6 months for a week and still felt very, very connected. There are limitations. There's a social aspect. My son plays Magic the Gathering, which is a card game, and you get together and you make friends. Well, he plays it online, but it's not as social online. Like, I've done like some like poker meetups online, and it's still seeing your friends, but it's not the same as being around a table and, having that normal cadence. But yeah, the world is absolutely adaptable. The pandemic has taught us a lot. I think the pandemic is going to make us appreciate what we had. So we're going to seg into what we're watching in a second here. We are doing not our normal 45-minute to an hour-long show today, simply because we're not 1,000% confident in our technology. I am on sort of sketchy hotel internet that, again, I had booked an office. The whole deal was going to do this correctly, and nothing opens in Vegas before 9 o'clock. It's 12 o'clock on the East Coast. It is 9 o'clock here on almost the West Coast. But Max, explain to me what you wanted to talk about with mRNA, and do a little tease, and then we'll do a little bit of a promo, and then we'll get into what you're doing there.
Yeah, so I think, the tease is that, investors do have to remain grounded about the potential for mRNA-based drugs. So of course we know, we have 2 very successful vaccines, well, multiple, but 2 of them are based on mRNA technology. So we have the Moderna vaccine and then also the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, both based on mRNA. Now, these were wildly successful. They were the first 2 vaccines approved around the world. And it kind of gave this big shot in the arm for mRNA. It's never been used before in a commercial drug. It's never been approved. And so, this kind of got people thinking, wow, look what it can do so quickly for vaccinations. This must also have great potential in, maybe cancer vaccines and maybe for treating different rare diseases. And that is true. But I think, there's a lot of nuances to that, right? Designing a vaccine is actually relatively simple in terms of what we're doing within the body. And designing a vaccine for something like cancer or for a rare disease is way, way, way more complicated. And we're still probably years away from being able to, generate like positive clinical trial data from that, let alone put these things on the market.
So we're going to talk about the investing implications of that. If you have questions on this, we're happy to take them. Not seeing a ton of questions, and I am seeing a lot of people watching. So either you don't have any questions for us, or the question platforms don't always work perfectly. But with that being said, you're watching 7 Investing Now. This is brought to you by the team at 7 Investing. What do we do at 7 Investing, Max? Besides staying up late talking on Slack, we make 7 stock picks each month. For those picks, it's our highest conviction pick. So each one of us only has to pick 1 stock. And then what we do is we do a write-up that explains to you why this is our highest conviction pick, why this is the stock we want people to buy this month. And then we record a video where we do what's supposed to be 15-minute presentations, but is always 30 to 45-minute presentations, where everyone can ask questions and push back. And so you really get a sense of what we think about these stocks. Now, are you supposed to go in and buy all 7 stocks each month? No, what you should do, and what's really easy to do, is sort of look at the types we pick. Like maybe you don't know much about biotech, so you want to diversify your portfolio by buying the stocks Max picks. Maybe you didn't ever think of retail as an investable space, and that's an area where my picks often come from. So you get a wealth of information. And what do you do to get that, Max? How do people have to come to Vegas and bring me, casino chips here to pay for it? You're welcome to do that, but that's not how you join. Max, how do you join 7 Investing?
Yeah, you don't have to make any offerings to Dan. All you have to do is go to 7investing.com/subscribe. Pretty easy. It's $17 a month, $170 a year. That's 2 months free if you do the annual subscription. Also have a referral program, so you can actually get months of 7 Investing for free. I don't know the exact numbers. We say it all the time. I forget, but someone's not paying.
So here's how it works.
Okay.
If you give out your referral code, and every member gets a referral code, the new person gets the month for either $10 or $10 off the annual, so $160. And the member who shared the code gets a free month. So if you join and then get 10 members of your family, your high school class, whatever, you could get 3 years, 10 years, whatever it is, of 7 Investing for free. But Max, before we do that,
Sam
Bailey
saved me. She said that, all right, we have one subscriber who doesn't have to pay for 7 Investing until August 2024. She's the keeper of that stat, so she's up to date on it.
And Sam Bailey, why don't you share the address if people would want to subscribe? It is, of course, 7investing.com/subscribe. We make it really easy. Usually all of our stuff, like if you want to see this live stream, and you can watch it on YouTube, you can watch it on Twitter, you can watch it on Facebook, but it's also at 7investing.com/livestream. We've tried really hard to make it very, very logical where our stuff is. So Max, are people jumping the gun here on sort of the investable aspects of mRNA?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for it right now, and it's great. It was a miracle for vaccines, and it makes a lot of sense for infectious disease vaccines, right? So we're probably going to develop flu vaccines based on mRNA and various other things. But it is there's still a lot of unknowns when it comes to using this therapeutic modality in other applications, other therapeutic areas. So, for instance, last week, Translate Bio, which is developing an mRNA platform as well. It had a drug candidate it was using in cystic fibrosis. So mRNA is great. It's a genetic medicine, right? And we can teach the body to make certain types of proteins. So here we're trying to restore protein levels in patients with cystic fibrosis and help improve their lung function, their ability to breathe. So Translate Bio formulated this mRNA-based drug candidate to be inhaled and get to the lungs. And in early stage trials, no functional benefit whatsoever. So of course, Translate Bio might not have all of the funding capabilities of something like Moderna or BioNTech. These are valued in tens of billions of dollars now, and they have billions of dollars in cash. But it does highlight that a lot of nuance is needed, right? You have to be objective when you're assessing this space. And there's a lot of little things that come into play. If you're trying to deliver this for a cancer vaccine or for cystic fibrosis, you have to get the mRNA payload into specific cells. You have to make sure that the mRNA is translated by those cells. There's different delivery technologies like lipid nanoparticles or peptides. Lots of little things, lots of nerdy things I could go on about all day, Dan, but that's not going to help. The point is, you have to be a little more grounded. Yes, it's going to work. I'm very optimistic that mRNA is here to stay. It's going to be, this decade we'll have other drugs that are moving through the industry pipeline, but it's not like we're never going to have any failures or risks. This is not exactly this miracle, technology. It's not just going to rapidly advance through clinical trials. There are going to be stops and starts. We're going to fail. We're going to have to engineer our way around problems we don't even know exist yet because we don't have the data yet. So, you do have to proceed with caution.
And from an investability point of view, you have to remember that failures are expensive too. But so we've succeeded with an mRNA-based vaccine. Does that mean that future vaccines, whether it be for COVID or other who knows what problems come up, does this give us a platform that will make quick vaccines more the norm?
Yes, I think so. So for future viral infections or respiratory illnesses, the flu, like I said, we're probably going to transition most of that, most of those capabilities to mRNA instead of current technologies, which are mostly outdated anyway. So mRNA is a much more ideal candidate for those applications.
Is it likely that it proves possible that there's just some things where this isn't the right candidate, that maybe for cancer or cystic fibrosis or who knows what, that this just won't end up being the best platform?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's part of my research framework that I go about when I make a recommendation or I want to invest in a company. One of the key things I do is look at the competitive landscape. So that's not just other mRNA based technology platforms, but other therapeutic modalities, right? So in genetic medicines, I think what it kind of gets missed in this conversation is you really do need to be technology agnostic. There's things that mRNA can do that CRISPR can't. There's things that CRISPR can do that RNA can't do, or that gene therapy. So on a case by case basis, each genetic medicine adds a lot of value. One can't do everything. So here, yeah, it's possible we try it out, and mRNA just doesn't work in cancer vaccines or something. But maybe antibodies are better. So yeah, it's important to be agnostic and don't become a cheerleader for any technology or any company that you own.
Max, is it possible that we could have one mega vaccine that makes me an indefeatable Superman? Is that
we're working on it, Dan? We're working on it.
Immune to pathogens, so I could travel to I don't know, malaria infested places and just eat mosquitoes or whatever.
Live from the Amazon.
I was gonna say, I didn't really want to eat mosquitoes before this, but now it seems tempting. And I'll point out, if it was trouble to find a great internet connection in Las Vegas, imagine how difficult it would be to find one in the Amazon. So I'm not sure that will work. Max and I did talk a little bit about how we might be bringing you this show in January from somewhere in the Bahamas. That could be happening, or perhaps from the deck of a cruise ship if we can figure out the technology. Max, what's the investing takeaway here? I mean, I feel like people hear a name. In the beginning of this, they heard, oh my God, Moderna has a potential vaccine. And people who didn't know that much about how the vaccines were going to work financially just went ka-ching, everyone's going to need the vaccine. And they didn't sort of read the fine print of they're selling them at a tiny profit or at cost. And now Johnson & Johnson is just giving them away and making them as fast as they can. I was vaccinated, didn't cost me a dime.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good event for providing liquidity and investments for these companies, right? They're going to have more capital to go and deploy to develop their platforms elsewhere. But a lot of these companies, like Moderna, is at an elevated valuation, no matter how you look at it, right? It's priced at tens of billions of dollars, its market valuation. That's where very, very successful companies with multiple drugs and billions of dollars in annual revenue are valued at, right? And Moderna is not anywhere near that in its development trajectory. So if you buy now, you might never make a return, or you might be waiting a very long time to earn a return on that investment. So I would proceed with caution. There's some themes that are maybe a little detached from reality, or there's a lot of elevated valuations, in my opinion.
So here's how I think of it. When someone's a really good athlete at a young age, in third grade, they're the best at every sport. It would be like investing in that kid and being he's going to be a pro. I want 10% of him. He's going to make hundreds of millions. And here's the reality. There are a lot of things that could derail that. He could not get big enough to be good at the sport. He could not be interested enough to put the work in. He could become a heroin addict. I saw that happen to someone I went to high school with. A lot of things could derail Moderna, where it becomes a successful company, but maybe not this behemoth we think it could be, or it could become a company with a platform that's been able to achieve a few things that doesn't work. Things like this can fail. As an investor, shoot, go ahead, Max.
I'll just say, I think too, when companies are kind of priced at these elevated values, they're priced for perfection. And even little setbacks, investors overreact, right? I mean, there was a company I follow last month, a very elevated valuation. It was at 100 times sales, and a preclinical asset failed, meaning they just decided not to move it into clinical trials, which happens every 3 hours, right? In the biotech industry, the company fell by 10%. Nothing is priced in, nothing can go wrong. And then one little tiny thing that doesn't matter goes wrong. And everyone's oh no, this whole thing doesn't work. It's so you're at an elevated risk when these valuations are so frothy.
To tie things back to the top of the show and lessons we learned in investing, I think we've learned adaptability, that things do go wrong. And one of the things you value companies for is how well they adapted. I've talked a lot about, say Starbucks or Domino's or so many businesses that found ways to operate, Walmart, Target, just those are businesses that operated really well in a difficult time. And it doesn't really matter if they're profitable during that time period. It matters that they showed they could continue, that they could survive, they could generate revenue. I just mentioned a cruise ship, like the fact that Royal Caribbean is porting out of the Bahamas and finding other places and ways to get revenue going, doing closed loop sailings to nowhere out of Singapore that's limited to residents, going out of Israel, which is something they never did, which is just for vaccinated residents. I think you're seeing which companies can scramble and figure out how to operate. And look, if you're a restaurant operating in a capacity, even here in Vegas, restaurants are 50% capacity inside. You have to manage your business to make money. And some of them are doing it by, places that didn't have brunch now have brunch. Restaurants that never were part of room service are now part of room service. So in theory, I could go eat on the floor in my empty second room here at the Paris in Las Vegas. We're going to move to the home stretch in a second. We're going to talk about the pace of biotech IPAs. See, we don't give you perfection here on 7 Investing Now. We come really close, but not perfection. We're going to talk IPOs. I am not particularly a fan of IPAs, so we will go differently there. But first, I want to take a question from Max Lucas. Max was going to be on the program this Friday. We're going to push that back a little bit, but he wrote a book on investing that we are going to do an interview on. We just don't know when. And he says, Dan, how crowded is Vegas? I would think that with all the stimulus and savings rates spiking during the pandemic, travel is loaded heading into the summer. So it's March Madness, and this is normally one of those times where even people like me who normally get comped rooms do not get comped rooms, or maybe you get a low rate, or maybe you get comped in like the crummiest of the hotel of the chain. In this case, I am staying in a suite at a nicer hotel than I'm usually booked at. Vegas is busier than you'd expect it to be, maybe, but not particularly busy. Like, it wasn't hard to find a chair on the casino floor last night. Dinner reservations, even with limited capacities, have not been hard to come by. So there are a lot of people here. And I will point out, there are a lot of people here that are wearing masks, that are sitting with plexiglass between them, that are generally abiding by the rules. The Max, I did see someone I don't know why. We were at O'Shea's, which is sort of an Irish pub casino that's kind of a fun, down and dirty place to go. And the person next to me was playing video poker, refused to put her mask on, and got dragged out by guards, which, it doesn't seem like. They didn't ask you to put a beard of bees on. They asked you to wear a mask. Doesn't seem all that complicated. But Max, we're going to keep it in biotech here. So we noticed, we've done this topic before, but the pace of biotech IPOs, it's pretty blistering, right?
Yeah, so far this year, there have been 19 biotech IPOs, biopharmaceutical IPOs. So that puts us on pace for 90 here in 2021. So for a little bit of reference, to put that in perspective, we usually see about 40 biotech IPOs a year. In 2018, I think we had like 44. In 2019, we had 38. A new record was set last year. In 2020, we saw 70 biotech IPOs, 71 actually. So that was far and away a record for IPOs. And this year we're on pace for 90. So if we can keep that, it just goes to show you like how hot this market is right now.
But this might be a strike while the iron is hot mentality. I mean, literally, if you and I right now put biotech or biopharma, so if we were like Max Dan Biofarm, what do? We cure stuff that's bad. We could probably raise $3 billion, right? Like we could SPAC it and just sort of have like some crazy presentation where, like, I don't know, we get a lot of our friends to wear white coats in the background, and we have like we could get Beaker from the Muppets to be in it. Like, we could have fun with this. And I'm teasing a little bit, but it's really easy to raise money right now.
Yeah, Dan, actually, I've seen a couple IPO companies. They just use stock images. We don't even need to get real actors. So it's even easier.
I've always wanted to meet Beaker from the Muppets. So.
But yes, for the most part, this is a strike while the iron is hot type of deal here. It's just so easy to raise money right now. There's so much appetite among investors and retail investors, for all things biotech, all things IPOs, all things SPACs. So if you can take the money and maybe raise more than you would have otherwise, it makes a lot of sense, especially for pre-commercial drug developers, right? They're going to burn through so much money in development. It makes sense to go and grab as much cash as you can right now. You don't know how long this window is going to happen and be open for. And we've already seen a number of recent IPOs already issue secondary offerings. So they've already issued more stock, again, to take advantage of kind of this like excitement in the market.
So this is one of those things. It feels to me a lot like the 90s. So I think Max, I was one of the founders of a really successful men's lifestyle website, bought out put about $1 million in, bought by Playboy for about $35 million. So a really big success. And then after that, it was really easy to get money for content companies, which seemed like they were going to be really profitable, which made no sense because it's not like magazines were like a giant source of profit most of the time. And I would go to meetings with companies that had millions of dollars, and we bootstrapped everything and spent no money and paid our friends $50 an article. And I would go in, and like the salaries they were offering were outrageous. One was called Blast Box, and it was for a mix of men's lifestyle and boxing. And they offered me just an astounding sum of money. And I literally said, well, could you just put that money in escrow? Because there's no way you're going to be in business in 6 months. But they got money. And I think that's what's happening in biotech. So for investors, Max, how risky is this? You don't want to throw your money at just every up and coming, biotech IPO.
Yeah, right. I think, in the long run and at the industry level, this is going to be a good event for the field, right? Things that wouldn't have been funded are now getting funded, or we're going to learn things in these trials, even if they don't work in basic research. It's going to, answer more questions. We'll know what obstacles we have to engineer around. So it will be a net positive, like all this easy money in the long run. But like you said, that doesn't mean every IPO is automatically, a buy and that you should invest in everything. All companies market themselves and tell this story about what they're doing, and it sounds really exciting. In reality, a lot of these aren't really differentiated from peers. There's certain therapeutic modalities that sound exciting, like cell therapy, but in reality, there's next generation things like next generation antibodies that kind of do the same thing. They're easier to administer. They're cheaper. Like a lot of those check boxes matter more in the long run. So keep in mind, a lot of these too, like there's a couple of companies that went public that are still in preclinical trials. They haven't even entered clinical trials. Most of them are in phase 1. But here's a little stat. Out of all phase 1 clinical assets, only 7% will actually reach the market. So you have to keep in mind, this drug development is still very risky. I don't care how innovative we are, or you think there's some genomic revolution, whatever that means going on, where there's still a lot of risk here in this field.
Genomic revolution coming to HBO Max in 6 months. So an important lesson to remember here too is biotech isn't just inventing, it's also marketing. So I have a cousin who works as a salesperson in the space. So I've talked about this a little more, and he represents a drug, and I won't talk about what the drug is because I don't remember its name. But he represents a drug that clinically is more effective than the leading brand. We always see those commercials where Tide is clearly the leading brand and it's Gain saying better than the leading brand. And in this case, you've got your clinical trials that say, yep, more effective. But insurance companies don't generally pay for the more effective drug. So when he goes into a doctor's office, he's fighting the uphill battle of, well, okay, this is 2% better for my patients. That's great. But what happens when their insurance company says no? So one of the battles is getting the insurance company to make that and improve. So there's a lot of variables here that aren't just, can company X cure Y? Because you could get 2 companies with a miracle cure for the same thing, and one of them has better marketing people. And even though it's a much more difficult drug to take with worse side effects, that could become the winner, right, Max?
Yeah, exactly. So, 7% of assets that enter phase 1 reach the market. By the time you reach phase 3, which is kind of like the right to the finish line almost, only 53% of assets actually reach the market. So it's basically a coin toss after hundreds of millions of dollars in investment and, your 8 years of development time. And even then, this is something that investors don't really realize sometimes, is once you reach the market, it doesn't mean you're going to be successful. Like you said, there's insurance companies. Maybe doctors aren't prescribing your drug. Maybe there's other things coming in a year that doctors are more excited about. So I think, too, we're in this weird space where there's so much innovation and competition. It's just going to affect, I think, later this decade, peak sales potentials. You might have the best drug and it hits the market, but maybe 2 or 3 years later, something else is even better. So that doesn't give drugs a lot of time to really ramp up and generate this giant recurring revenue streams like we have in the past. In the past, you made it to market and you were on the market for 10 years and you had this nice run and it was, lollipops and rainbows. And in the future, you might only have a couple years or so. So it really does change some of the dynamics and maybe some of the valuations and how we value these clinical assets too. So
funny you say that, Max, because I'll actually be going to lollipops and rainbows on the Vegas Strip later on today. No, I'm making that up. But Sam Bailey, we're going to hit our finisher in a few seconds. But before we put that up, let's do a little bit of a personal programming note. We are both here because of Simon Erickson. And Simon Erickson, the founder of Seven Investing, not only are we celebrating the 1-year anniversary of Seven Investing, but today we are celebrating the however many year anniversary of Simon Erickson. Happy birthday, Simon. Thank you for bringing us all together. Thank you for a job that I could do literally from Las Vegas and call it research when I am out. We'll talk about the recovery of the casino industry next week and sort of what that looks like, because I am, of course, boots on the field. And Simon, happy birthday. We thank you for that. Sam Bailey, we also appreciate you. We know this wasn't necessarily the easiest day to be here, and we are glad that you are. So if you want to put up our finisher, that would be very appreciated. Which of these stocks has the biggest upside? 50% of you say Tesla, 14.5% of you say Apple, 14.8% say Microsoft, and 20.2% say Google. I believe a lot in Tesla. Batteries and solar power are priced into Tesla. Apple has it, and so does Google, but I think Apple will execute better. Microsoft to a point too. Apple has a $2 trillion healthcare opportunity. I truly think they do. And I think you could argue that for Microsoft or Google, but if you've ever tried to use a Google device, I'm not so sure you'd feel all that confident about their healthcare ability. Like, if you've used like one of their like Chromecast devices, I think you'd be like, ooh, the Apple, one might be better. I'm not saying anything super negative about Tesla. I just think Tesla's already very richly valued, and I'm not sure they're going to prove as optional as people think they are, because Elon Musk has other companies. SpaceX isn't Tesla. He might have other genius that doesn't. The only reason they own the solar brand is because that was like a complicated like anti-bankruptcy ploy for the solar company. So this is not as cut and dry as people think. Your thoughts, Max?
Yeah, it almost seemed like those answers were in reverse order, like which company is valued right now the most like richly, right? Like Tesla's the lowest market valuation. Most people said that. I believe in Tesla's future. I think it's very overvalued right now. And yeah, I don't know. Like all those things are exciting, electric vehicles and batteries and solar. But it's like, is that really valued at? I don't know what the market value is now. 600 billion, a trillion. So yeah, just like you said, I mean, there's just because those companies like Apple, what is it? It's almost 2 trillion, or is it over 2 trillion still? Yeah, I don't keep up with the stuff much.
It's around 2 trillion. It's funny. So I appeared on a podcast about a year ago where we played a market cap guessing game, and I did pretty well on it because when I learned that was the topic, I went out and studied market caps because it's not really something I think about. I look at a company's roadmap, and I look at Apple and say, there's no reason they shouldn't continue to get more service revenue. That will provide growth of their regular businesses. That won't necessarily provide stellar growth, but what areas do they have opportunity in? Well, they have massive opportunity in the healthcare space, and they're moving forward really quickly on that. Does that mean Apple wins? No, but I do think even if Apple in what they develop isn't the winner, their ability to acquire or partner or be the platform or be the delivery mechanism. You could say the same thing about Google. You could say the same thing about Amazon. You could say the same thing about Microsoft. But I do think healthcare is going to be a really, really big space. Look at Best Buy as a sneaky big player in delivering healthcare. They own some companies that provide in-home services. But with that, there is a very large cup of coffee with my name on it, and perhaps a socially distanced picture with a dirty Elmo or Pikachu. If you've been to Vegas, you would know what I mean. There are people walking around in very poorly made Elmo costumes that you're in a normal time take pictures with. Now you kind of like, hey, and you're both 6 feet apart. So it is very strange to be in a responsible edition of Las Vegas during a pandemic. I'm sure there are places that aren't responsible where I've been, have been. For that, how do you get in touch with us? It is very, very easy. If you want to wish Simon happy birthday, that is at 7investing.com. Feel free to shout out his Twitter tag there, and he will see it as well. And of course, if you want to shoot us an email, you have questions about our service, you're thinking about joining, you are a member, you want to know Steve's home phone number so you can call him at all hours, email us at info@7investing.com. I am a little bit giddy. Got some good, exciting news today that I will share at a later date. But let's just say at some point next year, you'll be seeing me not talking about this as on a cable channel, which is not a job change. It's just a little fun little aside thing I got word about is going to happen today that I look forward to sharing with all of you. With that, for Max Chatsko, I am Dan Klein. Sam Bailey, thank you for doing this. We will see you on Wednesday.